Well, good day and welcome to episode 14, a special edition of not the driving force today, but the connecting force, for reasons that'll become apparent shortly. This is presented by the Louisiana Transportation Research Center. My name is Todd Blunt, and I am joined today by my friend, colleague, and co-host, Garrett Wheat.
Good afternoon.
We're thrilled that you've chosen to join us here as we highlight the people and projects that are driving change and making connections in Louisiana transportation. For the last 39 years, LTRC has merged the resources of state government and Louisiana universities to identify, develop, and implement new technology to enhance our state's transportation system and beyond. Today, we are really excited to kick off a brand new three-part series with several members of DOTD's Multimodal Commerce Group. These folks oversee the operations of Louisiana's non-road transportation infrastructure, including freight and rail, waterways, aviation, and as we'll learn more about today, ports. Louisiana is, of course, strategically located on the U.S. Gulf Coast. Mississippi River runs right through us. That unique geography means that ports are a really big deal for both our state's transportation system and economy. So to learn more about the inner workings of Louisiana's extensive port system, as well as get an overview of the OMC, we are excited to welcome Commissioner of the Office of Multimodal Commerce, Julia Fisher-Cormier, and Director of Ports, Molly Bourgoyne, to the show today. Julia and Molly are ready to give you a 101 on multimodal commerce in the ports of Louisiana. Welcome back to a special edition of The Connecting Force. As I mentioned a moment ago, we are all about ports today, and we're thrilled to have OMC Commissioner Julia Fisher-Cormier and Director of Ports, Molly Bourgoyne, with us as our special guest. Welcome, Julia and Molly.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, Commissioner, we are here today to talk about ports, but you oversee the entire Office of Multimodal Commerce at DOTD, which is more than just ports, of course. Can you give us a brief rundown of what the OMC is and does for the state?
Sure. First, thanks, Todd and Garrett. We really appreciate the partnership and support from LTRC as always. But back to the OMC. Office of Multimodal Commerce was created in 2016, and it lives inside of DOTD, but doesn't necessarily share the same mission, hence the name, commerce. Rather than that safety focus, we do focus a little more on commerce when it comes to the infrastructure we deal with. We do share some support services with DOTD, but we're very independent for the most part, and my position is actually appointed by the governor. So it's a little bit separate and apart, but we do share some of those day-to-day things with DOTD. And most importantly, we don't handle any roads or bridges. So I think you gave us a little bit of foreshadowing at the beginning. There are no roads and bridges inside of the Office of Multimodal Commerce. So we do handle 4 modes of transportation. We handle rail, passenger and freight rail specifically, 16 short lines in the state, and we do have a funding program for infrastructure improvements for those short line rail projects. Aviation and aeronautics, which I think you guys are going to hear from a little later. We have 69 airports in the state, 7 FAA certificated, and we do have a funding program for their infrastructure improvements as well. They have safety programs and a few other support services that they offer outside of just the funding. And then ports and waterways, which we're here to talk about today, ports in particular handles port priority. We've got $40 million in funding for infrastructure and development for our ports. We'll get to a little bit more in depth there a little bit later. But the OMC really has become kind of a conduit between DOTD's multimodal efforts and LED. We've enlisted the input of LED when we evaluate our projects, and for decades there really hasn't been any formal collaboration, so we've changed that. We're looking to move forward kind of in lockstep with other departments within the state. And so to recap, the Office of Multimodal is really alternate transportation with a focus on commerce. And again, no roads or bridges. So don't call me about your pothole.
Well, you kind of mentioned the 4 different the 4 different areas, but today we're going to focus a little bit on ports. Could you give us a background, how many and what kind of ports Louisiana has?
Sure. Louisiana has a really extensive waterway system. I think it's the reason we're all here today. But in general, give or take a few, given the day that we're in, we have 41 public ports. So the Mississippi River and its tributaries in the Gulf of America are home to our ports. 5 Lower Mississippi River ports start at Baton Rouge, so there's a port of Greater Baton Rouge. And the Port of South Louisiana is St. James, St. John, and St. Charles parishes. Then go down a bit Port of New Orleans is actually encompassing Orleans Parish and Jefferson Parish. And then go down a bit more, Port of St. Bernard, and then the Port of Plaquemines is the gateway to the Gulf.
Wow.
So we've got some other deep water ports, Port of Lake Charles, Port of Fourchon, and then the inland river ports really serve as an important part too. They literally all feed off of each other, cargo and resources. Imports and exports on the Mississippi River look like this. Commodities, we have some chicken, we have some fruit, we have energy, we have manufacturing with value-added construction materials, concrete, steel, and break bulk and aggregates is a big portion of the cargo that comes through the Mississippi River. That's anything that can fall through your fingers. So that might be some different minerals, that might be, again, some of that concrete I mentioned, and that can be containerized, that can be barges, and then, of course, petrochem is a huge piece of our Mississippi River commerce as well. That's right. Oil and gas, plastics. So basically everything you have in your house or your office is either made at a port or has come through a port, and likely from right here in Louisiana. So not only did it come from here, it likely travels via 2 or more modes of transportation. So grain, for example, is going to be probably barge to truck. Usually there's a rail element. 1 out of 3 is going to have rail as well. So water is not a standalone form of transportation. So again, although we don't handle roads and bridges, we do have that as part of our commerce and our trade routes and all of the cargo movements that come along the river and the tributaries as well.
Importing and exporting.
Absolutely, importing and exporting. So another important piece of what our makeup is jobs. So every one of 5 jobs in Louisiana comes from a port.
Wow, come on.
I think that's extremely important and impactful. And the water, like I said, is why we're here.
Wow.
You know, New Orleans was founded 300 years ago, and it was founded because of the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
So that really just kind of caught like wildfire around the state of Louisiana, and we saw what the value was in our water and our water system. So I think all transportation's important, but in Louisiana, it all comes back to the water in one way or another. It may have come from a truck, but it's going to end up in the water at some point. So I think, we rest on our water and tributaries and our systems here in the maritime industry. And I think it's extremely important for the state.
Well, we mentioned in the opening that Louisiana is strategically located to be a port-heavy state. We were just talking about that. So how does collaboration amongst our ports positively contribute to the state's economy? And how do they rank in terms of their comparison with other U.S. states?
So the state's port system really ramped up in the 60s, right? So the ports were given more power and broken down into sections of jurisdiction, and that worked for decades. And then we kind of became competitive with ourselves, and it became very siloed approaching development. So in the 2024 regular session, the legislature created the Louisiana Ports and Waterways Investment Commission, which I am currently vice chair of. And the goal was to create a Louisiana statewide port strategic plan, with collaboration being the name of the game. So we needed to show our strength as a state in a very collaborative way, which we had never really done. And so the statistic that jumps out at us that we really should be selling and haven't been for a long time is that if you combine the tonnage of the 5 lower Mississippi River ports in Louisiana, we are the largest port complex, not in the country, in the world.
Oh, wow.
On the globe. So the strength that comes from, those 5 lower Mississippi River ports and then all of their supporting partners through all of the other waterways is just unmatched. And so we've got to sell that, right? That's something that we need to be doing more of, and we are starting to do more of. Because those 5 lower Mississippi River ports shouldn't be competing with themselves. They should be working together. And so each port has its own niche, strength, whatever you want to call it. Port of New Orleans, we all know, that's cruises and containers. That's their wheelhouse, right? Port of Plaquemines, that's the LNG hub of the state. Port of South Louisiana has 7 of the 9 grain elevators in the state and is home to the majority of the petrochem. We know what we do best. So we've got to show the world what we do best so they're not confused, so they're not misguided, and so they really can, be attracted to the state of Louisiana so we can show that we are in lockstep with each other. We're the strongest system in the country, no doubt, but we want to be recognized as the strongest system in the world.
Yeah.
So, and also at the same time, through that strategic plan, we need to identify what infrastructure needs do we have to improve what's already there. Shouldn't be too much, I think we might have a number that we need, but When it comes to development, I think we have a lot already in place to basically succeed and serve the global marketplace.
So you mentioned the legislation in 2024, but are there any notable port projects in the process across the state or anything you'd like to see develop as we look into the future?
We have seen a huge amount of private investment come into Louisiana when it comes to port development. And there's one very notable project that we really hope to see come to fruition soon. It's been announced. So there's a Hyundai project in Ascension Parish. It is a steel plant with intentions of hopefully turning into some larger scale manufacturing of autos, which we don't have in the state. So we do not have an auto manufacturer in Louisiana, and we should. I think this project will lead to that hopefully at some point if we can play our cards right. But the project standalone is extremely impactful and extremely important. The amount of jobs it's going to create for the community is going to be impactful. It's a $5 billion CapEx project with very little ask from the state. And it's also another collaborative project. It's actually a very unique project in its structure. One port is going to handle the landside development, and another port is going to handle the dockside. One port didn't really have the comfort level or the expertise to handle the dock development and a lease of that caliber. And so Port Downriver said, well, we do, and we can work together on this. So this is a huge step forward when it comes to our collaboration in the state.
Well, Julia mentioned the Port Priority Program. Molly, can you elaborate on it a little bit? How long has it been in existence, and how does it work?
Sure. So the Port Construction and Development Priority Program has been around since 1989. So we're 36 years in, and it is a discretionary grant program that reimburses 90% of construction costs up to $15 million. The main goal of the project is to improve infrastructure, but it's also about providing those adequate landside facilities for our ports to be successful, to meet that market need, as well as to provide jobs, minimize congestion, and improve safety, both on the waterways and the connecting rail and roads. So we don't have roads and bridges per se, but I think it's important to note that our ports are the first and last mile of anything that you pick up off of a shelf or a hanger in the state. Applications are submitted on a quarterly basis, and those applications consist of basically a proposal for a project. We also contract with the state economist to ensure that the BC ratio, the benefit cost ratio of any and all projects, is above 1, and that the return on investment is greater than or equal to 2.375. We evaluate those applications in-house, and then according to administrative code, we prioritize the projects. And then that is presented to the Joint Transportation Committee at our state legislature, and they, knock on wood, approve the program for moving forward. One of the really interesting things about the program that sets it apart is that what we have what is called a reimbursement clause, so that when the Joint Transportation Committee approves a project or the list of projects, if the port has the funding or the bonding capacity, they can take a letter from us to the bank and move forward with the project immediately.
Okay.
So it really helps with inflation, market fluctuations, costs of steel, all the different things that have been going on since COVID that have such a huge impact on our cost estimates and things. They are able to move forward those projects immediately. Another reason why that's important is because the speed of commerce is not the speed of government. So
Amen.
we try and be as flexible and adaptable to keep the state moving forward as much as possible.
So you're trying to move as quick as you can within the realms of what you're able to do.
Right. And what's wonderful is that the legislature had the forethought to add that into the program. It is a discretionary program as well, so it's important to note that we're not guaranteed any funds. It is funded through the Transportation Trust Fund. There's a certain percentage that is set aside for several things, port priority being one of them. And we have been lucky enough to get about $40 million a year for the last 10 years. So that has helped the program move forward and move quickly. We do carry a backlog, but supply and demand. So we've got the demand, so they are supplying.
In addition to that $40 million and that backlog mentioned by Molly, that's one of the efforts that we hope to see that comes out of the strategic plan that the Ports and Waterways Investment Commission is heading up. If we can identify all the needs and we can vet them properly through the plan, I think we'll have the ammunition to ask for more money for our ports, because as you heard me mention earlier, we had a $5 billion CapEx project. That's one single investment in a port. And we have $40 million to share between 41 ports. We're seeing billion-dollar developments, and we don't have nearly what we should have to fund some of these port projects to get that return. So we really want to help improve the development of the ports, and we also want to compete with Texas, right? Texas gives about $250 million to their ports every year. So it's time to step up our game, and hopefully we'll see some of that soon.
One project that I especially love, because one of the things that we do in our interfacing with the ports in the state is we do all the regular project management stuff, reviewing of plans and specs, making sure that things are done according to public bid law. But we also go out and inspect the final inspections, and we go visit when the ports have questions about what is eligible for Port Priority Program funds. And on one specific occasion, I went down to the Port of Morgan City, and we walked around, and the port director was explaining how he wished he could use this piece of land that the port owns. However, there's a large ditch between it and the rail spur that the port owns. I asked him, I said, well, who owns the ditch? And he said, the local drainage district. And I said, well, if they're a public entity, which they are, you can sign an MOU with them, and you can use port priority to enclose the ditch, gravel over it, and now you have access to the rail, and another line of business opened up for the port. And that project was submitted and has been since built and is being used. And that's one of my favorite stories about the Port Priority Program. One of the other important things to note about Port Priority Program dollars is that it can only be spent on publicly held lands, port-held lands typically. So it cannot be spent, this money cannot be spent on private facilities or properties. It has to be spent on port facilities and improve the port and show that it will help create jobs, create revenues, increase tax revenues for the state, and help the port grow. In addition to reimbursing 90% of the project, it is required to have a public port willing to pay the 10% match of construction, all the soft costs that go in ahead of time, as well as a definite market need, which means that as part of their project proposal, part of their application that's submitted to us has to include letters of commitment. So this is not a field of dreams. If they build it, if you build it, they will come. They have to already have someone lined up ready to go. And that can be tricky in this day and age where a prospect will come to the port and say, hey, I need warehouse space right now. It needs to have a 5-ton overhead crane, and I have to have capacity to have a laydown yard of 1 acre next to it. So, but they have to have those people ready to go, signing off, saying, we will pay this much money to be here, and we will create this many jobs to be here. So it's kind of exciting to be in a situation where we're creating a huge benefit for the state and building stuff.
That is exciting.
As Molly mentioned, the Port Priority Program must be utilized for port-owned property, which is important to note when entertaining prospects for development. When you're structuring a deal, oftentimes there's a lot of negotiation going on. Will a private owner hold the land? Will a port hold the land? this is a prime example of why it's important for a port to own the property, because they've got access to dollars, not only on the state level, but there are pots on the federal government side as well that are specific to ports. So this helps the bottom line when it comes to structuring a deal with a port.
Are there any other initiatives you and the port team handle for ports outside of the Port Priority Program?
So we do some other things. There's always that 5% extra on your SF3. So we contribute to the state freight plan. We, of course, have studies jointly with LTRC. We also do emergency and hurricane response. Add kind of another avenue of conversation or communication with the ports and the governor's office, GOSEP, in the event of an emergency. We are considered subject matter experts in our areas and keep tabs on the pulse of the industry so that we can answer questions that come up and support our leaders when they get questioned on specific items.
I think based on this conversation, it would be hard to overestimate all of the ways that our port system is impacting the state, from jobs to economic development. This has been super enlightening. So.
Yeah, and it's really neat how the ports are spread out across the whole state. So there's not just one area of the state that benefits from them, since Louisiana is basically a floodplain. We've got the Red River Waterway, or the J. Bennett Johnson Waterway, the Ouachita, the Red, the Mississippi, and then the GIWW that, of course, crosses basically parallel to I-10.
Our waterways actually connect us to
Everything.
give or take almost 40 states and 2 Canadian provinces.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, before we go, we want to have just a little bit of fun with you with a few final lightning round questions that Garrett has prepared. So don't think too hard about these, just for fun. Garrett, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah. All right, so Joel, we have 2 questions for each of y'all. We'll just do them back to back if that's okay. So Julia, you're up first. Can you tell us what's your favorite outdoor activity and your favorite place to do it?
Offshore fishing
Okay.
in the Gulf of America.
Yeah. What kind of?
Preferably.
On a boat. Any certain type of fish?
Snapper.
Snapper. It's about to be snapper season.
It is. I'm hoping to be there soon.
All right, next question. What is your most creative or unusual Halloween costume you've put together over the years?
I feel like Molly may have tipped y'all off on this one.
Maybe.
Oh, I shouldn't think about it, but y'all have no idea how many in my arsenal I have. Creative.
There's just one that sticks out.
I was Lady Gaga one year, and it was a year that she wore a dress made of bubbles. It wasn't the meat dress year, luckily. I did consider that at one point, but I made a dress made of balloons.
Wow.
And yeah, made a bow out of hair, and I looked like Lady Gaga. Yeah, I think that's probably my most creative. Or the Joker.
Oh, yeah, that'd be good too.
Joker was my most fun, but maybe not my most creative.
All right, Molly, we understand you're a big reader. Could you share one of your favorite books you've read over the past year?
So, for fiction, I would have to say The Raven Ring. It's out of print, so good luck finding it. But it's a great fantasy fiction story. And then nonfiction, I'm in the middle of reading On Liberty by John Stuart Mill from, I think, the 16 or 1700s. So,
Fun.
And I'm going to put you on the spot with this too. So we understand your husband is a geologist, which we find pretty fascinating.
Yes.
So could you share maybe one of your favorite rock jokes?
the puns are fun. So yeah, my husband and I actually met. We are founding members of the Geology Club at LSU because I minored in geology as well. I like rocks. So nice T-shirt is a good one. That was our first Geology Club T-shirt because gneiss is a formation, a type of rock.
Haven't seen that one.
But my favorite rock is actually labradorite. So
And crystals.
yeah, I like crystals. I'm a crystal girly, but labradorite's my favorite.
Awesome. All right.
Well, thank you.
Well, thanks again for your time today. It was a lot of fun, and again, just super enlightening to have you here with us, telling us more about what you do and why it matters for our great state. We're going to take a quick break before we wrap up today's episode. Well, that's a wrap on episode 14 of The Connecting Force, presented by the Louisiana Transportation Research Center. You can learn more about what's happening at LTRC on a daily basis by visiting us online at ltrc.lsu.edu or on social media through Facebook, X, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We encourage you to like, follow, and subscribe to our channels on each of these platforms. And we hope you'll join us again for our next episode as we continue our 3-part series with DOTD's Multimodal Commerce Group. We're going to move from the water to the air next time to talk all about aviation. Until then, we are your hosts, Garrett Wheat and Todd Blunt, and we thank you so much again for joining us today. Drive safely out there.